And what is the next largest religious group in California?
Category?
Yes.
This is, again, based on, I believe, Pew Research studies. They identify evangelicals as the second largest group. And, evangelicals is a broad category. It's not hierarchy like the Roman Catholic Church.
And what percentage of Californians identify as evangelicals?
I think in these studies, again, where the figures are not
No,
clear.
no. I'm asking for your opinion.
My opinion.
In your opinion.
With the caveats that I have given about the difficulty of measurement, I would say about 20%.
That's your best judgment?
That's my best judgment.
Okay, so you got 30% Catholic and 20% evangelical, correct?
In the population.
And that would, if you take your 36 million for the population of California, that's 18 million people, right?
Yeah, more or less.
Now, if you know what the position, do you know what the position is of the Catholic Church with respect to same-sex marriage and homosexuality? Do you know that? You know that, correctly?
Yes, I do.
Now, the Catholic Church condemns homosexuals' acts as serious depravity, correct?
I don't know if I have seen that specific statement. I know they disapprove.
Well, let me ask you to look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 770 behind tab 22. Second page, last paragraph. Your Honor, I would offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 770.
No objection, Your Honor.
770 is admitted.
You see at the bottom it says, sacred scripture condemns homosexual acts as a serious depravity. Professor Miller, do you see that?
Yeah, I'm trying to see the context of the quote.
Well, when you have the context of the quote, let me know.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding of the Catholic Church's position is that there's a balance between moral disapproval of homosexual activities and desire to respect the dignity of the individual, which is on the next page.
Well, we are talking here about homosexual acts, correct?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify.
Homosexual acts. The Catholic Church takes the position that those are a serious depravity, correct?
The Church, it says, sacred scripture condemns homosexual acts as a serious depravity.
Right. Do you have any doubt that that's the position of the Catholic Church?
No.
Did you know that before I just showed it to you?
I knew that the Catholic Church morally disapproved of homosexual acts, yes.
Now, you said that evangelicals were a collection of churches, correct?
Yes.
And what's the largest church in California after the Catholic Church?
I'm not sure. I mean, you mean evangelicals generally?
Evangelicals will include more than one church, correct?
Yes.
There are more than one church. They describe within the umbrella of evangelicals.
Yeah, many of them are independent churches that don't have an ecclesiastical hierarchy of any kind.
There are churches that are evangelical that do have a hierarchy, correct?
Again, this is a difficult area of definition because within some of these traditional, I'm trying to explain why it's difficult for me to answer that question.
Well, let me try to ask you a question that maybe you can answer.
Okay.
Okay. Is it true that the Southern Baptist Convention is the largest single church in California after the Roman Catholic Church?
I actually don't know that. I believe that's true in the United States, but I'm not sure about California.
Have you investigated it?
I may have looked at it, but I don't recall.
Now, do you know what the view of Southern Baptist Convention is with respect to homosexual behavior? You know that, don't you?
Yes.
And that it is an abomination and shameful, correct?
Well, I knew that they morally disapproved. I didn't know about those terms.
Well, let me ask you to look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 771, which is behind tab 23, which I would offer.
No objection, Your Honor.
771 is admitted.
And the third paragraph, where it says, the Bible clearly teaches that homosexual behavior is an abomination and shameful before God. You see that?
I see that sentence, yes.
Now, did you investigate the position of religions other than the evangelical and Roman Catholics on the California Council of Churches with respect to Proposition 8?
Yes, I did.
And what religious groups did you investigate?
I believe it looked at Jewish traditions, the Jewish traditions and their positions on that, which were divided.
Which was divided.
Right.
And
the majority of the Jewish community supported Proposition 8 very strongly. I'm sorry. I have that reversed. I'm getting a little tired. Their position is that they favor same-sex marriage to the Jewish community in general, and the majority opposed Proposition 8.
Now, did you investigate what the view was of Orthodox Judaism?
Yes.
And?
As well as Reform and Conservative
And what was the view of Orthodox Judaism?
Orthodox Judaism opposes same-sex marriage.
In fact, Orthodox Judaism believes that homosexual acts, like adulterous and incestuous behavior, are condemned in the law of Moses. Those who do these things, both men and women, are according to God's law of the Old Covenant to be put to death. Correct? That's the law of the Orthodox branch of Judaism.
I don't recall that quote.
Well, look at tab 70, Plaintiff's Exhibit 2844, which I would offer.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, 2844 is admitted.
Do you see the second paragraph of the first page where it says what I previously read?
This is Orthodox Judaism.
I believe this is Greek Orthodox.
This looks like Orthodox Church.
Maybe it is the Greek, Your Honor. I think you are right. I have my exhibits backwards, but that's a good question. Did you investigate the views of Orthodox Christianity?
Yes, I did.
And is this the view of Orthodox Christianity?
I don't recall.
Well, let me try to be sure I understand what you are saying. You investigated the views of Orthodox Christianity, correct?
Yes, yes.
And Orthodox Christianity is actually a large religion in California, correct?
It could be, well, there's diversity within Orthodox Christianity, different national groups. There's Greek and Russian Orthodox. I actually don't remember. There are various views on this issue.
And are you aware of any Orthodox Christianity group that promotes or favors same-sex marriage?
As I recall from that list from the California Council of Churches, there were Orthodox churches listed in that coalition.
Those were individual churches, correct?
I don't believe so. I think it was just...
All right, let's go back to demonstrative 22. As you have listed the Greek Orthodox Church as a member of the California Council of Churches, but you are not suggesting that the Greek Orthodox Church favors same-sex marriage, are you? Or are you? I guess I don't know. Are you or are you not?
No, again, they are part of a coalition.
Yeah, I understand they are part of a coalition or part of the California Council on Churches. My question is a very simple one, sir. Does the Greek Orthodox Church favor same-sex marriage? Yes? No? I don't know.
I don't know what the global Greek Orthodox Church's view on this is.
Do you believe there is a Greek Orthodox Church in California that is separate from what you refer to as the global Greek Orthodox Church?
Again, I don't know why.
Again, yes, no, or I don't know.
I believe there's local units of the Greek Orthodox Church, including one that would join the California Council of Churches.
And does that local unit, as you describe it, favor same-sex marriage? Yes, no, or I don't recall, or I don't know, or I never knew.
To the extent that they are part of this coalition, they are. In terms of whether they would, as a matter of doctrine and practice, I don't know.
And you keep referring to the California Council of Churches as a coalition. By that, do you mean they've gotten together for the purpose of supporting same-sex marriage?
Well, I believe that that's a major part of their legislative agenda over the past couple of years, yes.
Of the California Council of Churches?
Yes.
The California Council of Churches does a lot of different things, right?
I would assume so. I'm not intimately familiar with their work.
Your Honor, let me speed this along, all right? Let me offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 2840, which are at tab 66, 2839, which is at tab 65, 2842, which is at tab 68. Those are all various statements by religious groups.
No objection, Your Honor.
Which was the last one?
2842, which is at tab 68.
All right, there being no objection, 2840, 39, and 42 are admitted.
Now, as part of your work, did you investigate the extent to which the groups favoring Proposition 8, the religious groups favoring Proposition 8, that contributed far more in money and manpower than the groups opposing Proposition 8. Did you investigate that?
I wasn't able to determine in a quantitative way the monetary and organizational contributions of the progressive churches to the No on 8 campaign. I didn't have any access to the No on 8 campaign's internal documents to know about that. I know a little bit more about the religious contributions, religious organizations' contributions to the Yes on 8 campaign.
And that's because you did have access to the Yes on 8 Proposition campaign, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the extent to the of the documents. I have seen some that would allow me to form some judgments on this, but I can't make a comparative judgment.
Well, let me ask you to look at Plaintiff's Exhibit 2552, which is behind tab 96.
2552.
2552. This is one of the documents that you had available to you.
Yeah, I believe so. I have seen this document, yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 2552.
No objection, Your Honor.
2552 is admitted.
And if you go to the second page, the second paragraph that begins grassroots signatures, do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And this is an email from Mr. Prentice, correct?
Appears to be so, yes.
And this says, the response from churches is larger than ever before experienced in California. More than 2,000 pastors have been addressed at events, and 300 churches have offered their staffs and facilities as distribution centers for petitions. Do you see that?
I do.
And they're talking about the pastors and churches that are supporting Proposition 8, right?
It seems to be, yes.
And that's the way you interpreted when you received this document, correct?
Yes.
All right, let me ask you to look at the next exhibit. It's Plaintiff's Exhibit 2561 behind tab 95. Is this one of the documents that you reviewed, sir?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 2561.
Subject to our standing objections, Your Honor. No objection.
Very well, 2561 is admitted.
And the last paragraph of, the last sentence of the first paragraph. Well, let me begin earlier than that. This is also an email from Mr. Prentice, correct, sir?
Yes.
And it says, as you probably know, the LDS Church is sold out for the marriage amendment. The giving from the state's Mormons is topping $6 million right now with no signs of slowing down. You see that?
Yes.
And this is dated August 25th, 2008, correct?
That's correct.
And the last sentence in that paragraph says, you may know that the Mormons have been out walking the neighborhoods the last 2 Saturdays with about 20,000 total volunteers.
I see that sentence, yes.
And do you have any reason to disagree with that sentence?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't have any personal knowledge, but I don't have any reason to disagree with that.
Apparently it takes massaging to get evangelicals to action, according to this.
In that case, it might not be any different than the rest of us. Now, you said that you could not make a comparative analysis as to whether the contributions of religious groups opposed to Proposition 8 were greater or lesser than the contributions of religious groups favoring Proposition 8. Is that correct?
Well, I can't make a quantitative sort of ratio comparison. I think it would be fair to say that the contribution of religious organizations in favor of Proposition 8 was larger than the, at least financial contributions, perhaps also organizational contributions to the No on 8 campaign. But again, I haven't seen the internal document of the No on 8 campaign.
All right, let me just see if I understand what you are saying. Are you saying that it is your opinion that religious groups that favored Proposition 8 devoted substantially more time, money, volunteers than the religious group opposed to Proposition 8?
Objection. Compound.
Objection overruled.
Again, this is based mainly on media reports.
Well, I'm asking for your opinion, sir. If you don't have an opinion, if you haven't looked at it enough, that would allow you to well, if you don't have an opinion, if you haven't looked at enough, that would allow you, as an expert, to have an opinion. You can say no. Do you have an opinion on that, sir?
Well, so with the caveats about my inability to get some information on the other side, I do have an opinion, which is to say that in my view, there was a larger contribution of money and organizational resources from religious groups to the Yes on 8 campaign than on the No on 8 campaign.
Do you have an opinion as to whether, in fact, the religious groups that favored Proposition 8 supplied most of the institutional support for Proposition 8?
By institutional support, that would be...
Is institutional support a phrase that you use as a political scientist, sir?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we
Well,
are
then
on the
let's
same...
first, you use that term, right?
Yes.
And what do you mean by it when you use it?
So, in an initiative campaign, it could be...
Well, no. What is it? Not what it could be. What you use that term. When you use that term, sir, what do you mean by it?
Well, it depends on the campaign. Different campaigns are run differently.
Well, let's talk about, Proposition 8, just to pick one out of the air.
Okay, fair enough.
In Proposition 8, what did you mean by institutional support?
So, there would be fundraising. There would be organization of you just sort of get out the vote, mobilizing voters. There would be professional campaign staff. There would be probably attorneys involved in the campaign. So this is what in the political science literature is sometimes called the initiative, sort of, I guess. Institutional structures, support structures.
Okay, and you believe that churches and religious organizations provided most of the institutional support for Proposition 8, correct?
I don't know whether a lot of those people I just listed were churches and religious organizations. They were certainly...
All right, let me ask you to look at tab 25, Plaintiff's Exhibit 796.
Tab 25?
Tab 25, Exhibit 796.
Okay, I got it.
Okay, turn to page 55, please. Second paragraph, you say, churches and religious organizations supplied most of Proposition 8's institutional support, with Catholics, evangelicals, and Mormons leading the way. Correct?
Correct.
And this is an article that you wrote in the French Journal, the one that you referred to as your peer-reviewed article, correct?
Correct.
And I would offer Plaintiff's Exhibit 796.
Objection, Mr. Thompson.
No objection.
Thank
Your
you,
Honor.
sir. 796 is admitted.
And this was published in 2009, correct?
Yes.
And then you go on to say, California's Roman Catholic bishops and many evangelical pastors, including black churches, encouraged parishioners to support the initiative through financial contributions and volunteer efforts. You see that?
Yes.
And you believe all that is true, correct, sir?
Yes. When I wrote this, I was relying on press reports, and that was my understanding, and nothing that I have learned since then contradicts that.
Okay, then you go on to say, leaders of the Mormon Church organized a massive effort to support the initiative. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you go on to say, while Mormons are only 2% of California's population, members of the church, both from California and from other states, provided critical financial support and volunteer support. You see that?
Yes, I
And
do.
you believed that at the time, correct? And still do, right, sir?
That's correct.
And even though you may not be an expert on the No on 8 campaign, do you know enough about it to have an opinion as to whether the primary institutional support for the No on 8 campaign were churches and religious organizations?
In terms of primary, I would say probably not. I mean, they were certainly part of the coalition, but the coalition was different on the no side than on the yes side.
Was part of the support for the No on 8 campaign, what part of support for the No on 8 campaign was provided by churches and religious organizations, sir?
Well, certainly grassroots
How much?
organizing.
How much? What percentage?
What percentage? I don't know.
Approximately.
I have no idea because I haven't seen that information.
Well, how do you know that religion is critical in determining voter attitudes towards You know. You do know that religion was critical in determining voter attitudes towards Proposition 8, correct?
I believe religion was a factor for some voters, certainly.
Well, it was more than just a factor. It was critical in determining voter attitudes towards Proposition 8, correct?
I think it was a critical factor for some voters, yes.
Well, sir, let me ask you to look at the next page in the article that you wrote in 2009.
Yes.
Last paragraph on page 56, you say, Egan and Sherrill noted that several factors contributed to the support of Proposition 8, including age, party identification, ideology, and religion. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Then you go on to write, in particular, these researchers confirmed that religion was critical in determining voter attitudes towards Proposition 8. You see that?
Yes.
And you believed that at the time, correct, sir?
I think what I probably meant to say was some voter attitudes, given that list that I had just put above there about party identification, age, ideology, and religiosity being 4 factors. And I believe that religion was a critical factor for at least some voters.
No,
yes.
no. You don't say at least some voters here, do you, sir?
No, I don't.
And,
But I don't think that I ever believed that it was a critical factor for all voters. And it was a critical factor for some, clearly.
and did you believe that it was a critical factor in determining the election?
That again, I don't know.
That again, you don't know. Well, let me ask you to go look back at page 47 of this article. And for context, I want you to look at the sentences right at the top of the page, you know? Where you say that, you there?
Yeah.
Many observers were mystified as to how California, who was in the forefront of same-sex marriage, civil rights for gays and lesbians, and who gave Obama such an overwhelming majority, had so many Democrats that could have voted for Proposition 8. You see that?
Yes.
And this is the dilemma or conflict that we talked about earlier. Having all of these so-called powerful forces and allies that you say gay and lesbians have in California, and yet confronting that with the passage of Proposition 8. We talked about that before. Now, then you answered that question, correct? You answered why and how this apparent contradiction can be explained, correct?
I do.
Yeah, and you say the apparent contradiction can be explained by examining the religious characteristics of California's Democratic voters, correct, sir?
I still agree with that, yes.
And you still agree with that?
Yes, among a number of factors.
No. You don't say a number of factors here, do you?
I do later,
Well,
actually.
right here you say the apparent contradiction can be explained by examining the religious characteristics of California's Democratic voters. That's what you say right here, right? Dr. Miller,
Just let me find the quote.
it's on page 47, right at the top of the page.
Yes.
We went through the contradictions, and then you say, and it's a one-sentence paragraph. You see that? One-sentence paragraph.
Got it.
The apparent contradiction can be explained by examining the religious characteristics of California's Democratic voters. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and you believed it then, and you believe it now, right, sir?
Yes, I do. Religious characteristics was an important factor in the election.
No, sir, you didn't say an important factor here, did you? I ask you, please look at the language, because I'm asking you, when you wrote this language, you clearly believed what you were writing in 2009, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, since 2009, have you changed your mind?
Well, I think this was an important, a critically important factor was the religious characteristics of Democratic voters.
Okay.
I think there were other factors in the election as well.
Were there other critical factors?
I think there were a number of factors
Were
that
there
influ-
other critical factors? You used the word critical factor.
Again, we haven't seen polling on why people voted for Proposition
All
8.
I'm asking for is your opinion, sir. You have come in here as an expert, okay?
Yes.
And you wrote in 2009, just last year, that the apparent contradiction that we have been talking about can be explained by examining the religious characteristics of California's Democratic voters. Now, you said then that you thought religious characteristics were a critical factor in determining how people voted. You just said that a moment ago. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Now, what I'm asking you is, in your opinion, was there any other critical factor in determining how people voted?
Yes.
Okay. Would you please list those critical factors?
Again, this is without the benefit of polling data because we
No.
had
All I'm asking for is your opinion. Your opinion based on the investigation that you have done, because you have come in here as an expert to give your opinion, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, based on all the investigation that you have done, what, in your opinion, is the other critical factors? Not just the factors, but what are the critical factors?
So I believe that religiosity is a critical factor.
Yes, and indeed, that's what you say here.
Yes, I do.
Right. And you don't list any other factors here at all, do you, sir?
No, but that wasn't. But I did later on in the article.
Well, did you list any other factors later in the article that you called critical factors?
I believe among other things, I listed.
Sir, can I just ask you to answer the question? I promised your counsel I was going to be through by now, and now I'm way over my time. If I could just focus on you to answer my questions. Did you list any other factors?
I didn't list any others that were critical, but I, again, haven't done an investigation as to whether those other factors were critical. I think some were certainly important.
In fact, in the article you say that opportunity to establish gay marriage was lost, in part because of California's Democratic coalition. They divided among religious lines, correct?
Can you point me to that part in the article?
Well, first of all, it's page 57 and 58. Now, what I'm really asking is that's your view?
Well, it would really help me to be able to see it. So 57, 58?
Yeah, and I don't have any objection to you looking at it, but do you understand that I'm just asking you for your opinion?
Yes.
And is it your opinion that the opportunity to establish same-sex marriage was lost in large part because the state's Democratic coalition was divided among religious lines?
I think that the analysis of the article
Please,
is that
Mr.
there was...
Dr. Miller!
Your Honor, the witness has been cross-examined for about 2.5 hours. He indicated about an hour ago he's a little tired. I would request that he be given a 10-minute break.
Well, there's something about pots and kettles talking about long examinations, Mr. Thompson. But it might be helpful to take a break, might clear the air, so we'll take 10 minutes and resume at 10 minutes after the hour. Mr. Boies, you may continue your examination of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. As a housekeeping matter, I would offer, and this is without objection, Plaintiff's Exhibit 1397, which is behind tab 31, and Plaintiff's Exhibit 2856, which is behind tab 81.
81.
That's the tab number.
Very well, then those exhibits are admitted.
And one other housekeeping matter. Professor Miller, you have Plaintiff's Exhibit 794A there, which is the index of materials you considered?
But yes.
All right. Now, I just have two questions on this. The first is, you went through and circled all those items that you could recall having researched and obtained yourself, as opposed to what you were given by counsel, right?
These are the ones I was certain about, yes.
And you circled, by my count, about 23% of the materials there, correct?
I haven't done a percentage, I don't know.
Well, would you agree that it was less than a quarter?
Again, I don't know. I would say it's less than half, and I don't know how much less than half.
Now,
and there were many that were, well, maybe I should explain the question marks if you want an explanation on that.
go ahead.
Okay.
Explain it.
Well, these involve reports about religious organizations, and I did a lot of my own research on this. I also received some materials from counsel about religious organizations and their positions on Proposition 8. It's difficult for me to sort out from this very long list of materials which ones I independently found and which ones counsel provided, but I think my report used mainly the ones that I had independently investigated, and I certainly looked at everything that I put in my report before I put it in there.
And these were the materials that you, in your report, indicated that you had considered and relied on, correct?
Yes.
Now, I do want to follow up on what you just said about the question marks that you attached to a number of the documents that relate to religious organizations.
Yes.
You are aware that Dr. Nathanson put in a report, correct?
Yes,
And you did not see that report prior to preparing your report, correct?
that's correct.
And you did not talk to Dr. Nathanson or anybody representing him prior to the time you put in your report, correct?
Well, that's correct. Well, anyone representing him, I don't know.
Anybody other than your counsel?
Correct.
Right. So, if you have received any of the Nathanson's material, you would have received them from counsel, correct?
Yes.
And I would represent to you that between 140 and 150 of the question marks that you put down are on items that appeared on Dr. Nathanson's list of materials in the report that he submitted prior to the time that you submitted your report.
I wouldn't know one way or the other.
And I take it you would agree with me that if these items appeared on Dr. Nathanson's list, you got them from your counsel. It's not just a pure coincidence that the two of you came up with exactly the same list of documents, is it, sir?
I wouldn't know what to say about where the documents came from, except that I know that I got the documents, some of them, not all of them, with a question mark from counsel.
All right. Well, let me go back to the question that I had when we broke. I was asking you whether it was your opinion that the opportunity to establish gay and lesbian marriage in California was lost in part because of the state's Democratic coalition was divided among religious lines. Do you have an opinion on that, sir? Now, I'm not asking you what you wrote in one article or another.
Right, right.
I'm simply asking, as you sit here now as an expert offered by the defendants, do you have an opinion on that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that opinion?
I believe that that sentence is substantially correct. I would probably want to explain it and put it in context, but I don't disagree with the main idea in the sentence.
And just to be clear, when you are talking about the sentence, you are talking about the statement that the opportunity to establish gay and lesbian marriage in California was lost part because the state's Democratic coalition was divided among religious lines. Correct, sir? Sir?
The sentence doesn't say that. It says
I didn't
the
say
opportunity.
the sentence. I didn't say the sentence that the sentence said that. What I tried to say is, regardless of what you have written.
Right, okay.
Okay, regardless of what you have written, as you sit here right now, do you agree with the opportunity to establish same-sex marriage in California was lost in large part because the state's Democratic coalition divided among religious lines? Do you agree with that?
I think it's in large part that's a fair statement, yes.
Okay. Now let me ask you to look at page 57, first full paragraph, the last 5 lines. You write, "The evidence indicates that through the teaching and mobilization of churches or by other means, many of the state's black and Latinos viewed the marriage controversy in terms of religion rather than civil rights, and thus believed that they could, without contradiction, support civil rights, identify as a Democrat, vote for Barack Obama, and still vote for Proposition 8. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And you wrote that, right, sir?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you say the evidence indicates, what evidence are you talking about?
Well, so this would be a couple of things. One is the exit poll data and post-election surveys indicating that a substantial share of African Americans and Latinos supported Proposition 8. And then additional information basically based on press reports of mobilization in the black and Latino communities on behalf of Proposition 8, but some, but not all of which was based in churches. So that's the evidence in some.
Now, as a political scientist,
Yeah.
are you aware of any principle that suggests that a religious majority should not be able to use the law to impose their principles on a religious minority?
Objection to the form.
Objection overruled.
It's a pretty broad statement.
Well, from time to time throughout history, and you're aware of this because I presume from your political science background, there have been conflicts between a majority religion and a minority religion, with the majority religion attempting to impose through law restrictions on the minority religion, correct?
Well, there have been many times in history, world history, where that's been the case, yes.
And as a matter of political science, is there a generally held view that it is an undesirable way to organize a civil society?
Well, more a majority to impose its religious
Principles
principles.
on a minority,
I think in a general sense that would be an accepted principle.
that it's undesirable.
That would be a principle that many political scientists would agree with, a general principle.
I just
yes.
want to understand what you mean by the general principle. You're saying that the general principle that a religious majority should not be able to use law to impose their views on others is a generally accepted principle of political science.
Well, there might be exceptions to that.
What?
There might be exceptions, but I think that's a general principle.
As you sit here now, are you aware of any exceptions to the general principle that it is undesirable for a religious majority to use the law to impose its views on a minority?
I guess if you look at American history, there have been times where a religious coalition built in support of a project.
No. I'm not asking you about a religious coalition. I'm asking you...
A religious majority, okay, maybe in favor of abolition.
And the religious majority there, what was the minority? First of all, the abolitionists weren't a majority, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, they were a part of the coalition that ended slavery, right?
Well, the abolitionists were actually quite a small minority as a matter of history, right? Yes, no, or I don't know.
Well, activist abolitionists, yes.
Well, second, who was the minority that the abolitionists were imposing their views on?
Slaveholders.
Slaveholders. And in your view, were slaveholders a minority that needed protection?
No, I mean, they may have had views about, which I believe are distorted views about the religious justification for slavery. I mean, that would be a religious minority.
Now, I'm just trying to understand what you just said. You're saying that slaveholders may have had a religious basis for their views, and therefore it was inappropriate to impose a different view on them.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to this whole line of questioning. It's well beyond the scope of direct. I didn't get into anything from the 19th century.
Well, counsel is attempting to inquire about Proposition 8, and he is responding to the witness's statements. If the witness were to directly respond to the questions, then, well, there would not be the need to go into these matters, Mr. Thompson.
Your Honor, he asked about world history was the first line in this question.
The objection is overruled. This is cross-examination, Mr. Thompson.
Professor Miller, focusing on today and focusing on California and the United States, as a professor of political science who is said to be an expert in political science in California and the United States, do you believe that it is generally accepted that it is not appropriate for a majority religion or majority religion coalition to impose their views on a minority?
I need to change
Please
the phrase.
answer the question.
I think there might be circumstances where political science generally would be quite disposed to agree with a religiously based argument that might be held by a majority. But again, I think the principle you're driving at is that world political science in general believes it is inappropriate or undesirable for a religious majority to impose on a religious minority its views. And I think probably a majority of political scientists would agree with that.
Your Honor, I have no more questions.
Mr. Thompson, we direct?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Before you do that, I should ask counsel for the Attorney General if she wishes to inquire of this witness regarding his views on the responsibility of the Attorney General.
I would be happy to, Your Honor.
Very well.
Good morning, Dr. Miller.
Morning.
Earlier, I believe you testified in response to one of Mr. Boies' questions that the role of the Attorney General in the title and summary process somehow served to ameliorate the otherwise anti-democratic tendencies of the institution in California. And I was wondering if you could tell me what the basis was for that opinion.
Okay, well, the basis for that opinion is, I mean, we're talking about institutional checks on direct democracy, and one of the stages of the initiative process is that the Attorney General writes a title and a summary. So the proponents don't get to write their own title and summary in California. And so to the extent that the Attorney General is able to craft a title of the initiative, then that provides an institutional input into the initiative process. So it's less pure majoritarian than if that stage did not occur.
How does it provide that check on the process?
Well, again, it's not the proponents writing the title and summary. It's an outside, independent, elected official who does that.
Is it your understanding that the Attorney General can do anything other than provide a neutral title and summary?
Well, what that was certainly contested in this last, the Proposition 8 election.
What was contested in the Proposition 8 election?
That the title that Attorney General Brown provided for Proposition 8 was contested by the parties on both sides. Some thought that it was unfairly characterizing the initiative, and others believed that it was fairly characterizing the initiative.
I understand that. But your understanding of the law in California, Dr. Miller, is that the Attorney General must provide a neutral title and summary. Or is it your understanding that the Attorney General can provide a title and summary that casts an opinion about the measure that's being submitted to the voters?
Okay, here's my understanding. I believe that law tells the Attorney General to provide a neutral opinion. I believe most students of California politics would say that there is within the Attorney General's office some discretion on how to characterize initiatives. And these are often considered very important because voters get to see this title and summary as an important cue to them.
And one of the things that opponents or somebody who challenges the Attorney General's title and summary can do is to go to court and argue that the title and summary was not neutral under California law. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Can the Attorney General do more than provide a neutral title and summary? Do you know?
Do I know?
Do you know whether the Attorney General can do something in addition to providing a neutral title and summary for the initiative?
It's different in different states. I can't recall any.
We are talking about California.
Right. Yes, in California, I am not aware of any time where the Attorney General has
That's
done more.
not the question.
Yes, I guess the answer is I don't know.
The question is, can the Attorney General do something more than simply providing a neutral title and summary?
The Attorney General can publicly oppose the initiative or support it. In terms of institutional challenges, I'm not aware of any.
You don't know, is that it?
That's right.
You don't know?
Thank you.
Anything further?
No.
Very well. Now, redirect, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have my very last binder of the trial, for myself anyway. It's very short. May I approach, please?
Well, that's good news.
Professor Miller, you were asked some questions about materials provided to you by counsel. My question is, how many of the topics in your report did you personally investigate?
All of them.
How many of the materials considered in your listed at the end of your report, the 427 of them, how many did you personally consider?
I reviewed most of them. I can't recall closely analyzing all of them, but I believe that I tried to review all of them, yes.
And please describe the research methodology that underlay your opinions relating to progressive religious support for the No on 8 campaign.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question?
Sure. Please describe the research methodology that underlay your opinions relating to the progressive religious support for the No on 8 campaign.
So, I did extensive reading of progressive religious organizations' websites. The Pew Report, which provides a lot or the Pew website, which provides a lot of information across various denominations. Those are some of the important things that I looked at.
All right, now, I would like to switch gears. You were asked some questions about a study you had done over a 4-decade period of ballot initiatives, and you had made some comments about California and Colorado and other states and how there was a potential of some of these initiatives to tap into anti-minority sentiment. My question is, how successful were the California initiatives in the 1970s that had the potential to tap into a strain of anti-minority sentiment against homosexuals?
The only one that I'm aware of that I can recall is Proposition 6. I think that was the only one on the ballot during that decade, and it was defeated by the voters.
And how successful were the California initiatives in the 1980s that had the potential to tap into a strain of anti-minority sentiment against gays and lesbians?
Those were the three measures dealing with HIV, AIDS, and the either quarantine or reporting of suspected HIV patients, which was, I considered, very anti-homosexual and or gay and lesbian initiative. And it was, all those initiatives were defeated by the voters decisively in California.
All right. Now, you were asked some questions about polling, and you were asked questions about whether a majority of the gay and lesbian community supported the repeal of DOMA. I would like to direct your attention to tab D of your binder.
Okay.
This is a document prepared by Professor Segura and Ken Cimino, and it's DIX 2649. And I would like to direct your attention to the last page, Table 5, where it says halfway through the table, self-identified LGBT, and it lists in the right-hand column that the support, at least at the time of this document, which was 2005, for same-sex marriage was 73.5%. Do you have any basis to dispute that number, the validity of that number?
No.
Your Honor, we would move the admission of DIX 2649.
Your Honor, we would object. Mr. Segura, Dr. Segura, was on the stand, and he could have been examined about this document. There is no foundation for it to come in through this witness who never saw it, and we think it's not appropriate to bring in the document after the witness is off the stand, so the witness can't explain it or put it in context.
This was, I gather, not an exhibit that was used with Professor Segura?
It was, as a matter of fact, and I forgot to move it into evidence.
Well, in
And
that case, Your Honor, I withdraw my objection.
very well.
2649 will be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, you were also asked some questions about prejudice today in society directed against gays and lesbians. What polling data, if any, are you aware of that analyzes the relative warmness or feelings of the people of California towards gays and lesbians?
Of California specifically, I'm aware of a field poll. This is the field organization poll in, I believe, it was in 2006, where there was questions asked sort of similar to the National Election Studies Feeling Thermometer Index, 0 to 100. And, well, this was in, as I recall, 2006, and from my memory, 65%, something like that, close to two-thirds of Californians held either positive or neutral views towards gays and lesbians.
All right, now, let me ask you some questions about religion and prejudice. Do you recall that you were shown document from the Vatican and the Southern Baptist Convention?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to direct your attention to tab, to a certain tab in your binder. This is Plaintiff's Exhibit 5, and it's called the 10 Declarations for Protecting Biblical Marriage. And the first line is, God loves all people, therefore we love all people, and we will do so regardless of how some view or define themselves sexually. How does this comport with your understanding of the position of evangelical churches?
I think this is very consistent with the vast majority of evangelical churches.
Your Honor, we would move the admission of Plaintiff's Exhibit 5.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Now, you were also asked about the role that prejudice may have played in the Proposition 8 campaign. And, Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to play what I believe is a 30-second ad that was run during the campaign. It's DX2308. I would like to publish it on the screen.
Has it been moved in?
No, Your Honor, I'd be happy to play it and then let Mr. Boies see it and object at the time if he, or however the court would prefer to proceed.
Your Honor, I did not go into messaging with the witness. I did not put him to the campaign messages or ask him about that. I don't know what.
Well, it's certainly something that was put in the plaintiff's case.
Yes, it was. It was clearly put in the plaintiff's case. I'm just talking about the scope of cross-examination.
Let's hear it, then we can determine whether or not it's beyond the scope.
Well, in fact, why don't we actually, very well, let's just play it.
Is this a video or an audio?
It is, Your Honor. It's a video. I think we're experiencing technical difficulty, and I'm happy to move to a different subject and come back to this unless we can.
Why don't we just do that?
Yes, I apologize, Your Honor. We will come back to that in just a short moment because I don't have very much. Now, you were asked some questions about laws that were enacted pursuant to the Defense of Marriage Act. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And when were the vast majority of those laws passed?
You mean the State Defense of Marriage Act? The vast majority were in the mid-2000s, 2004, in that period.
And how do you explain the timing of those laws?
So my analysis, as I set forward in my book, is that they are largely following the Goodrich decision in Massachusetts, and that was in 2003, as I recall.
All right. Now let me ask you this. You were shown and you discussed at some length your Santa Clara Law Review article that you did before you completed your PhD. And since you completed your PhD and have written your book, Direct Democracy in the Courts, can you explain the evolution of your thinking on this subject?
Object to the form of the question, Your Honor.
I beg your pardon?
I object to the form. It's just an objection as to form.
Can you explain the evolution of your thinking on the initiative process?
Since when?
Since the time you wrote the Santa Clara Law Review article in 2001 when you were a graduate student.
So, in 2001, we've had a lot of discussion of articles I wrote a decade ago. Again, I pursued what I thought was a Madisonian critique of the initiative process and its comparative institutional disadvantages compared to representative government. And those articles are very clear on that comparison. And at the time, I thought that the best way to think about this problem was to think of the courts as being an important institutional check on pure democracy. So that was my approach to this problem up through about 2001, 2002. I decided to continue pursuing this area of research over the after I finished my time as a graduate student, and I took a year-long research leave at the UC Berkeley, and this was in the period shortly after the Goodrich decision. The paper I wrote for the APSA rather in 2005 started to show my the shift in my thinking about this. It becomes fully developed in my book, which was published a year ago or less than a year ago, and that is that I have a more favorable view of the initiative process after having reviewed the entire 100 plus years of this process, dating back to the very beginning of the 20th century. I see it as a way in which the people can express and express popular sovereignty in a constitutional system. The other thing that that shaped my thinking about this, again going back to the origins of the initiative process, is that many of the early arguments for direct democracy, especially presented by Theodore Roosevelt during that period, was that it could provide a check on judicial activism. This was the Lochner era, and a lot of progressives thought that courts were expanding rights beyond what the people wanted. And so that direct democracy could exercise an institutional check on courts, and when there is a contestation over the proper scope of rights. So this becomes the basis for my book, Direct Democracy in the Courts, which is that there are two competing forces in the American constitutional system that diverge from what I consider the Madisonian ideal. Now, the Madisonian ideal is that popular sovereignty and minority rights are harmonized within the legislative process. My early research showed that, in my view, direct democracy could pull decisions out of the legislative process. But my later analysis looked at ways that the courts could pull the decision-making process away from the people. And so the way I now look at the marriage controversy is that it's one of these conflicts over the scope of rights and the ability of people to have an input into the definition of marriage. Ideally, from my perspective, this would happen through legislatures. Now, we have an initiative process in this country that allows the people to vote directly, and I don't have a problem with that. I noted that we had some discussion yesterday about state domas and where that they came from. 11 of them came from citizen petition, but the majority of them came from legislatures. So if we are concerned about defense of marriage amendments coming, bypassing representative government, that's not the case in the majority of states where they have been adopted. In the United States, you have a consensus between representative government and direct democracy in establishing this definition of marriage. In my view, and this came out of my analysis of the Goodrich decision and later in remarriage cases in California, taking that decision out of the hands of the people in general is an example of the courts taking too strong a position on the issue, this fundamental issue of social policy in the country. So I think of it differently than the courts exercising a check on the majority imposing their will on the minority.
All right. Now, how, if at all, has your thinking about Proposition 22 evolved since the time you wrote your 2001 Santa Clara Law Review article?
Again, this was before I had done this project that I just described of comparing direct democracy and judicial review in the form of judicial activism. So I was still thinking in terms of the problem of majorities and minorities. And again, I would say that many of these initiatives were described affecting gays and lesbians. I would still put in that category. Proposition 6 would be one of those where the majority was imposing anti-discrimination against school teachers who happen to be gay and lesbian. And I decided after a long time thinking about this that marriage was a different situation and that the people should be able to have input on the definition of marriage and that it wasn't necessarily sort of invidious discrimination against the minority group. I think it's perfectly fine if the consensus builds in the country for there to be legal recognition of same-sex marriage, but that's different than having it imposed by the court. Finally, with respect to Prop 22, at that point, I viewed gays and lesbians in California as being what I considered a vulnerable minority. And if you look at the context of 22, there's more evidence for that. There was, I think, on the No on 22 campaign raised or was able to spend maybe $4 million to fight that initiative compared to $43 million in 2008. The amount of the coalition allies that they had in 2000 was very different than they had this last 2008. So I may have misread the situation in 2000 with Prop 22, but I definitely have a different view of it today.
If we leave aside the marriage referendum and initiatives that you have examined, how have the political goals of gays and lesbians fared in the initiative process in the last couple of decades, leaving aside the marriage issues?
Okay, well, there have been very few initiatives in the, across the United States that affect gays and lesbians, if you set aside the marriage initiatives. And so it can't be said the initiatives process is stripping away rights. Now, there's a few examples. If we go back to the 1990s, Amendment 2 in Colorado would be something that I would look at as, an initiative that was very sweeping and broad and eliminated the opportunity for gays and lesbians across the board to achieve rights through the political process or through ballot measures. So that would be something that I would still think would be in the category of an initiative that would adversely affect gays and lesbians. But aside from that, there are very few that I can think of that would be that would fall into that category of negatively affecting gays and lesbians.
Now, do you recall that Mr. Boies also showed you an amicus brief that William Eskridge had co-authored in the remarriage cases?
Yeah.
And do you recall that this relevant sentence he read to you? It said, "The proponents of Proposition 8 centrally maintained that state recognition of same-sex marriage would require schools to teach vulnerable children that gay marriage is just as good as traditional marriage."
Yes, I believe I recall that was a sentence in that amicus brief, yes.
And the next sentence, do you recall, said, "That claim has no basis and its acceptance by some voters probably made the difference between the gay minorities having the same marriage rights as the straight majority and having no marriage rights at all." Do you recall that?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would like to now publish as demonstrative PX20, which is already in evidence, and it's one of the official ads of the campaign.
Very well.
All right. Now, Professor, you were asked questions about anti-gay stereotype. Leaving aside anti-gay stereotypes, what political themes were articulated in that ad?
Objection, Your Honor.
It is beyond the scope.
Well, Your Honor, he was asked about the messaging, and he was asked about whether the messaging...
It is clearly beyond the scope.
Okay. Well, do you think that that ad is confined to the proposition that schools would teach vulnerable children that gay marriage is just as good as traditional marriage? The very thing that Professor Eskridge said probably made the difference?
Your Honor, I object both on the terms of scope, and he has no expertise in this.
I'm just reading from the portion of the amicus brief that he was cross-examined about extensively about whether the central maintaining message.
Objection overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to restate the question.
Okay, so leaving aside, actually, could the court reporter read it back so we don't have another objection?
He's not the only one who's forgotten the question.
Yes, I apologize, Your Honor.
Happens, counsel.
Then my answer is no.
And why is that?
Well, there were. I might have to go back and look at it again to refresh my memory.
I'm sorry. Why don't we just play it again?
That would be very helpful.
Your Honor, I object. We're not going to play this in a second.
We're almost done, Your Honor.
I thought you were on the right track, Mr. Thompson.
I apologize.
You were focusing on the Eskridge article since that was placed before the witness during his cross-examination. If you're going to proceed that way, that's fine.
Okay. Given your familiarity with the campaign materials, what were some of the issues other than children being taught in schools that gay marriage is just as good as traditional marriage?
Okay, I'm recalling the ad a little bit, and one of the things is you have a law professor there talking about the imposition by judges of a decision in this issue that would prevent the people from being able to, through democratic process, determine this issue. And I think there's also a theme in there of traditional marriage, which is, I think, a different certainly than, what was suggested by Professor Eskridge. So there is really two themes.
Very well, Your Honor. We have no further questions.
Are you saying that it is never appropriate for the judiciary to intervene in the initiative process?
No, Your Honor.
When is it appropriate?
In my view, it's appropriate when an initiative, or just like any other statute enacted by a legislature, violates, in this case, the federal Constitution.
And who is to make that determination?
That's ultimately a question for the courts to decide. The context of the, and this is the first time that we are really getting this aired in the federal courts, there was an issue in the state courts as to the interpretation of state constitutions. And should I explain what I mean?
Well, you made an interesting comment that the initiative process provides a check on a Lochner judicial activism. And yet you have just said that it is appropriate for the courts to intervene in the initiative process in some circumstance. And what I am trying to tease out is the circumstances under which you think it is appropriate.
Well, there's a well-grounded constitutional principle that is violated by the initiative, and that's my view on it. And the Eskridge article, the Eskridge-Kane brief, dealt with state constitutional law, which is somewhat different. It's more flexible. There's opportunities for the voter to amend constitutions. So that's where you have the interplay between popular majorities and courts, which is somewhat different than the relationship between the initiative process and federal constitutional law.
So where there is that well-grounded constitutional principle at stake, the initiative process, in your view, should, consistent with political theory, be checked.
In the same way that state legislatures or Congress should be checked.
Very well. Thank you for your testimony, sir. Council, we're going to take a break for luncheon. I'm going to hear a motion to suppress while you're having luncheon. It'll probably mean that we won't be able to be back until 1:15 or thereabouts. Is that agreeable?
Yes, it is.
All right, then. See you then. Very well, Mr. Cooper, please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. We called David Blankenhorn, Your Honor, and we have a binder to hand out. May I approach the witness with it?
You may indeed.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. State your name
David Blankenhorn.
and spell your last name, please.
Blankenhorn.
And your first name.
David,
Spell it out, please.
David.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Blankenhorn.
Hi.
Mr. Blankenhorn, I would like you to turn to tab 1 in the binder that's in front of you. And, Your Honor, this is the declaration of Mr. Blankenhorn. And I'd like you to turn back to, actually, it's not a numbered page, but it's right behind page 25. And is that your CV, Mr. Blankenhorn?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, behind tab A in the binder, we have created a new exhibit that is just Mr. Blankenhorn's CV. It's exhibit DIX 2693, and we would move that into evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
Very well, DIX 2693 is admitted.
Mr. Blankenhorn, would you please briefly describe your educational background for the court?
I graduated from high school in Salem, Virginia in 1973. Graduated from college, from Harvard College, in 1977 with a degree in social studies, and I graduated in 1979 with an MA in history from the University of Warwick in Coventry, England.
And did you receive any honors?
Oh, as an undergraduate, I received the honor of magna cum laude, and it's with my MA degree. They called it with distinction.
I didn't hear what you said.
It was called with distinction. MA with distinction.
And did you receive any fellowships?
I received a John Knox Fellowship as an undergraduate for a year study abroad.
And were you on that fellowship at the University of Warwick?
Yes, sir.
And after graduation from the University of Warwick, what did you do then?
I served 2 years with the VISTA program, Volunteers in Service to America, where I worked as a community organizer in several communities in Boston, Massachusetts. And then for the next 4 years, I worked as, after VISTA, I continued my work as a community organizer in several different communities in Massachusetts and Virginia.
Okay. And what did your work in these neighborhoods entail?
Well, it was working and living in low-income communities where there were a lot of challenges, and our job as organizers were to create grassroots organizations in those communities to increase their voice in the political system and to advocate for reforms that they thought were important.
You mentioned challenges. What did you mean by challenges in those communities?
Well, you see a lot of the problems firsthand when you live and work in, in poor communities where there are lots of issues that need to be addressed. And I think, for me, seeing the weakening of, seeing the weakened state of community and family institutions in those communities in some ways was, especially the role of, especially how children were living without their fathers, caused me to particularly interested in that issue, and to, well, then that led me to my next round of work.
Okay, and what was that?
Well, I started with some colleagues. I started an organization called we're up to 1987. I started an organization called Institute for American Values, which is a nonpartisan think tank that it works on. The primary focus is on issues of marriage, family, and child well-being.
And what is your position in the Institute for American Values?
I'm the president.
And could you explain the type of work that the Institute does?
Well, we commission research, usually by putting together teams of scholars that would work on projects for 1, 2, 3, or years or more, and then we would release the findings of that work. We hold conferences, and we, I would say perhaps our signature product is what we call Report to the Nation. And that's where an interdisciplinary team of scholars tries to tackle what we consider to be an important issue, working very intensively for a fair period of time, and then they jointly release these findings, and these recommendations.
Are you one of the, what are the subject matters that the Institute focuses on?
Well, as I mentioned, the main subjects would be fatherhood, marriage, family structure, child well-being. In recent years, we have added other issues to our agenda, but that has always been our primary area of concentration.
And does the Institute produce any regular publication?
We produce an annual report called The State of Our Unions, which is a report on the state of marriage in America. And we produce a periodic report. We're working on the 3rd edition now, called Why Marriage Matters, Conclusions from the Social Sciences.
And that latter report, what does it address, seek to address?
We pulled together about 15 scholars from different fields in the social sciences and from different points of view on the political spectrum, and had them work together very carefully to come up with a consensus statement on what they felt were the principal social science findings regarding marriage as an institution. And we've published the 2 editions now. We renew them as more research becomes available, and now we're working on a 3rd edition.
Mr. Blankenhorn, are you personally involved in the Institute's research and publications in its other work?
Yes, sir. Either in some cases as a principal writer or investigator, and in other cases more as the more in the capacity of identifying the teams of scholars and working with them to refine the topic, and then working with them in a non-leadership capacity as they do their work and as they then release the results of their work.
And is there a subject matter or field that you devote your personal efforts to in connection with that, with your personal involvement in those projects?
Marriage, fatherhood, family structure.
Mr. Blankenhorn, have you authored any books?
Yes, sir. I authored, relevant to this topic, I authored a book in 1995 called Fatherless America. That was a study or a book about the consequences of having approximately 35% of U.S. children living apart from their fathers. And it pointed to, I argued that this was a serious social problem. And then in 2006, I published a book called, 2007 rather, published a book called The Future of Marriage, that just looks at what is happening to marriage today and how we might take steps to strengthen it in the future.
Okay. I want to explore a little further both of those books.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Fatherless America. Describe the research you undertook in connection with writing that book.
Well, I did interviews with fathers in 6 different cities around the country and used the transcripts of those interviews as basis for writing portions of the book. And I conducted a literature review of the scholarship at that time on the role of fathers in the lives of children. That was a basis. And thirdly, I convened scholarly conferences or gatherings where commissioned papers were produced, and we would discuss these papers on different aspects of fatherhood and father absences. And those discussions and working with the scholars in that way also furthered my thinking about the topic.
And did your book, Fatherless America, receive any commentary? Or what kind of reaction did it receive when it was published?
I think it's fair to say that it was widely and generally respectfully reviewed. In the New York Times, the Washington Post, Book World, LA Times, the Chicago Tribune, Wall Street Journal, Newsweek, U.S. News and World Report. It was featured on the CBS Evening News. It was widely reviewed.
And did it occasion any appearances on your part in connection with discussion of the book?
It led to quite a bit of public speaking at university and civic groups and elsewhere.
And I think you said it was reviewed. Dr. Michael Lamb has testified in this case. Did he review your book?
Yes, he reviewed it in one of the professional journals. And he disagreed with some of its findings, but said some respectful things about it as well.
Well, and in fact, I'd like to publish to the screen, Your Honor, if I may, demonstrative number 1. Now on the screen, Mr. Blankenhorn, is this among the things that Mr. Lamb said?
This is among the nicer things he said, yes.
Your Honor, may I inquire whether the review is in evidence?
I don't know.
It is.
It rings a bell, I must say.
I believe I used it with Dr. Land, Your Honor, and moved it into evidence. We can check.
I think we've seen this before. I could be mistaken, of course.
We have seen it, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Thompson and I have seen it before.
And Your Honor, I believe Mr. Blankenhorn's book, Fatherless America, is in evidence. I think there may have been some confusion about its exhibit number, but I believe it's in evidence.
The witness's book or Lamb's article?
The witness's book, Fatherless America.
That's exhibit number?
Your Honor, it's Defense Exhibit 103.
Thank you.
DIX 103.
Very well.
Okay, now, I'd like to turn to the other book you mentioned, The Future of Marriage. Would you turn to tab 2 of your book? Of your witness binder here.
Yes.
And would you describe what you find there?
Well, that's a picture of the cover of the book, The Future of Marriage. And as I said, it was from 2007 and talks about what is happening to marriage and what the consequences of these trends are, and it makes recommendations on how we might, as a society, seek to strengthen the institution.
And could you describe how you researched and prepared to author this book?
I spent some concentrated period of time with some guidance from some colleagues, trying to immerse myself and become familiar. A literature review, conduct a literature review of the anthropological literature related to fatherhood as, marriages as a cross-cultural institution. And I conducted a series of consultations with an interdisciplinary group of scholars, 3 of them in different parts of the country, to discuss the issue. And then I just also consulted my own accumulated body of having read and written and spoken about this issue for the past 20 years.
And this book, The Future of Marriage, did it receive commentary when it was published as well?
It did. It was not as widely reviewed as Fatherless America, but it did receive some attention from reviewers. And it also caused me to be invited to do quite a bit of public speaking and to engage in conversation with... in the book, I argue that we should not adopt same-sex marriage, and so the book caused me to be invited to participate in quite a number of conversations with proponents of adopting same-sex marriage. And I think, in a way, that might have been the most interesting and important outcome in terms of the public impact or public, the results of the book.
I would like to publish now demonstrative number 2 with respect to the commentary on your book. And, Your Honor, for the record, if the court please, I'll just read that Mr. Dale Carpenter, Professor Dale Carpenter, a University of Minnesota law professor, said of the book, probably the best book yet written opposing gay marriage. Blankenhorn is a serious scholar and thinker. And then Professor Francis Fukuyama had this to say. David Blankenhorn enormously deepens the current debate on same-sex marriage by recovering the historical understanding of marriage as a public institution designed to promote and foster procreation and the raising of children. An understanding based not on religious conviction, but on observation of how our species has resolved over time. It is a thoughtful and important addition to the contemporary debate. Are these among the comments that your book generated?
Oh, these are. These mean something important to me because Fukuyama is an internationally respected scholar, the author of many books. Professor Carpenter is a prominent law professor who is a very active proponent of gay marriage. So when he says it's the best book against, he might have been dampening his praise a little bit from his point of view, but it was a very generous thing for him to say.